Welcome, everybody. We are just starting. I apologize for this slight delay, but our day was very busy today. I would like to introduce you to Khaldun Bshara, who is the director of Refugee Center, and Refugee Center has a long tradition of bringing back in the shape the architecture heritage, Palestinian architecture heritage. Yesterday, some of you had a chance to listen to Khaldun's contribution for the last presentation, and today we'll have a chance to hear the lecture about the division of the spaces in Palestine. Yeah.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Khaldun Bshara, director of Refugee, but I'm here in my capacity as a witness to the socio-cultural, spatial, political changes in Palestine for the last 47 years also. I want to talk about the logics behind the division of space in Palestine, and I thought I need to wake you up after this wonderful lunch by playing these two clips. Which gives you an idea about the space in Palestine before I give my intervention.
أهلا وسهلا، زمان عنك. وينك يا رجل؟ يا والله اشتقنا لك. وين انت؟ ليش تتصلش؟ تعال اشرب لك كاس لنا. جبت لك مجموعة أغاني جديدة، إشي بطير ضبان العالم. لازم تيجي تسمعها. بعدين اسمع، في حفلة الليلة بالستونز مع دي جي، إشي مخيف. كل الشلة جاي، لازم تيجي. عظيم 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 عظيم. يلا باي حبيبي.
أتلف عقلي إبليس يشتروا من تشويش ضايق علي صدري ما يهدى وسوسي.
يا أهالي رمضان من يتجول من يتجول. يا أهالي رمضان من يتجول من يتجول. يا أهالي رمضان من يتجول من يتجول. يا أهالي رمضان من يتجول من يتجول.
So this was the first part of the
something happening in this presentation. I'm going to talk about the logics behind the division of space in Palestine, but there is like a structure.
Yeah, could you use the microphone, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry. There is a structure, and I would use the word agency in a very reluctant way. So there is a colonial structure in place, but people do other things while that thing is happening. So it's that double bind that we are in it always already in Palestine. So always we talk about urbanity and we think about the city as the manifestation of the urban, actually. What is the urban space if it's not the city? But in Palestine, what makes a city city? This is a question that is almost existential, as architects and planners deal with this question all the time. So is it planning that makes a city city? Or is it the scale and size? Is it the permanency that Sandy was talking about yesterday? In Palestine, we are not new to cities. We have cities since, actually in Palestine, there is the first agricultural settlements in the world. It's 10,000 years old now, Jericho. But it is a fortified place with agriculture, with continuity of living, space, traditions, sacred practices, burials, and so on. Keeping cattle, growing crops. So Jerusalem is one of these cities everybody knows about it. It has neighborhoods, residential, commercial, specialized markets, some for wool, some for meat, some for shoemakers, and so on. We have Nazareth in the north, in the Galilee. Have Haifa. Haifa was always on and off. When Acre went down, Haifa becomes more important, and so on. So it's a division of labor almost. Acre, our harbor city, the way to Europe, before Jaffa even. And then if we say like it's a planning and the scale and permanency that makes a city, but what about other exceptions that we face every day in Palestine? So for instance, this is Kufr Aqab, 110,000 people living in an informal city between Jerusalem and Ramallah. And all these 12-floor buildings, most of them are 12-floor buildings because the concrete machine can pump concrete until 46 meters. So this is the scale that we have been witnessing in Kufr Aqab. Kufr Aqab is an informal city because it is part of Jerusalem, municipal council, Israeli municipal council, but outside the wall. There, the people can find a place to live without a permit if they are married to a Jerusalemite who wanted to keep their identity card according to the Center of Life policy of Jerusalem. So if you are Palestinian Jerusalemite, you have to prove that you are living in Jerusalem. And one of the proofs is to live there. And living there is not easy always in Jerusalem because it's either expensive or you have mixed marriages between West Bankers and Jerusalemites. If you are West Bankers, then you will need a permit to go to Jerusalem, which is Israel. And if you are Jerusalemite and leave Jerusalem borders, then you lose your identity card, which is very complicated. This makes this slummy place attractive to marriage couples from different spaces, and it is a lot cheaper than inside Jerusalem. So this is one case of informal, no planning whatsoever. Planning is carried between neighbors. I witnessed in my apartment building 2 months of negotiations where to put the balconies of the neighboring building. And I have photographs for this area for the last 8 years now, and I saw it growing like monster in front of me. Sometimes we were having discussions, that building, when did it come up, actually? Then I go to the records, the photographic records, to see that this existed in 2006, 2015 or 2016 and so on. So it becomes a game for me. So south to Palestine, there,
Can I have a question? When did it start to be built?
especially after 2007, 2008, it becomes a booming. But after 2001, for sure, after the closure of Jerusalem because of the Second Intifada, it was not easy to take permits or to go to Jerusalem. So this started the boom in 2001, but accelerated after 2010 when the prices in Jerusalem becomes unbearable. To give you an idea, if you want to buy an apartment or to rent an apartment, it's 3 to 4 times the price of Kufr Aqab. So it's better to live in Kufr Aqab and have less Israeli control and less Palestinian control. There is no police there. There is no army there. It's only invasions temporarily. They can invade the place. Yeah, okay, there are many things that you don't like, but mostly I like that there is no scrutiny, no police, no policing whatsoever. There is other social system that takes care of the order of the city. So South Palestine, there is this city, it's called Yatta. Yatta is more than 120,000 people. And they raise cattle. They are not city, they are not urban. So the size does not make it a city. They have 500,000 cattle, goats and sheep. There are 100,000 for every person, and more they have 5 sheep and goats. So they are farmers, they are Bedouins, but still it is actually one of the largest growing cities in Palestine. What's the name of it? Yatta. Then we have this phenomena, which started in 1948, the Palestinian refugee camps. If it's about temporary or permanency, so these are 71 and 5 months old camps, okay? This is Balata camp near Nablus. It's like, it looks 2-3 floor buildings, but a closer look, for instance, to Jalazon refugee camps, you find that it's like 4 or 5 floor buildings. And in Gaza, the beach camp, for instance, has more than 100,000 people in less than half kilometer square, which makes it the most congested place on earth. And this is supposedly temporary structures. And they are made from concrete, not from the stone that we try to differentiate permanency and temporarence using the stone or not using it. So, to make a long story short, what the logics behind the divisions of space in Palestine is not one thing. But mainly, for me, is like colonization is the first thing that comes to mind, not always in a negative way, but sometimes in a positive way. Okay, for instance, space management becomes a big thing with the British mandate invading Palestine in 1917. Actually, they started planning once they arrived. In 1917, they created a plan for Jerusalem. 1918, 1921, 1933, 1944. They were obsessed making a planning. Actually, Jerusalem becomes a laboratory to make planning. So urbanization is also connected sometimes, always with colonization, but we know from new studies that urbanization was part of a whole movement from late Ottoman era. Ottomans were trying to put their empire on the civilization route by making urbanization and urban development and even creating cities from zero, like Salim Tamari talks about creating Bir Sheva or Bir Saba, 1902, the grid plan, new city totally, there was nothing there other than the Bedouins around, creating a city from scratch. So urbanization is a process that started in late Ottoman era and continued during the colonization era, from the British colonization, I call it colonization, but it's mandate era, and then accelerated actually in Jordanian rule time and during occupation, although to less extent. But urbanization presupposes a dyad, which is rural, the existing of the rural. And this dichotomy is not always easy to capture because, as I showed, Yatta is almost the largest city village in Palestine, growing, I mean, and there is not so clear cut between what is a city and village. So villages has been going a lot of urbanization and lots of movement between village and town, and I will come to the point of movement now, about migration. So modern expressions, actually there is a lot of modern expressions in city, and is a city as a modern creature. So we can see like at the end of 19th century, early 20th century, like the Ottomans tried to enforce their power or centrality through providing bell towers or clock towers in cities like Acre Safad, Nazareth, Haifa, Nablus, Jerusalem, and Jaffa. So this, what makes a city is time. Edifices that control time, and people are paying attention what they are doing with their time, because otherwise the rural time was concerned with the seasonal time, the cropping, the plantation, and so on. So it's a new imaginary of a time that is not for the rural production, it's rather and urban production. This is one expression, but we have the railroad that started in the 19th century, which is a big thing about the landscape, but also about modernity. Monumentality, yes, every city that can divide the urban space from the rural space is the monumentality. It's like you can find churches, you can find mosques, but you can find markets, open spaces, fountains sometimes, drinking fountains sometimes, or fountains. Also, you can find palaces and large buildings. That is different than the villages. Although we have some exceptions, but this is the fluid boundaries between urban and rural Palestine. Consumerism, this is a big thing in Palestine. Like we know that by early 20th century that we have new types of consumerism, including culture, music, and the new ways. I love dogs outside the house. Anyway, but okay. So consumerism is accelerated since 1920s with the British mandate era. There was lots of employment within the mandate era bureaucratic web, and this provided money, cash for labor. And this cash labor has to go somewhere else. So people have changed the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they eat, forks and knives and tarbush or sweat or something else. So it has been moving. The consumerism is taking like a great push or something like that. So urban also, which is, although the rural Palestine is also a gendered class space, but in urban centers that is also amplified. So there are spaces for women, there are spaces for high class, there are palaces, there are governor houses, there are police and so on. There are places for women, especially in urban centers. You have, even with the same house, you have a place for the men, zalamlik, and the space for women, haramlik. So it was already divided and sanctioned the relation between the two sexes, although there was lots of penetration in between. And colonial legacies, actually, this is, even when think that colonialization has gone, the British mandate, or the Jordanians' rule moved, and so on, but there is still this attention to the urban center as a place for the headquarters. There is the borders, there are the fences, there is the privatization, all taken care of by the state in urban centers more than the rural Palestine. So the centralization and state power is more manifested in the urban center rather than in rural Palestine, which was a kind of indirect rule, usually. They delegated the rule over the peasants or the rule over the tax collection to the noble families of the rural Palestine. Migration, as I showed with the refugees, just imagine overnight in 1948, Ramallah tripled in population, or Gaza tripled or even quadrupled. So this migration made Ramallah, which was a small village, into a city with lots of demand on space, lots of demand on consumption, lots of demand on facilities and so on. The main case with Gaza. So longing and memory sometimes contribute to the way that we urbanize the space, including the refugee camps. So there are meaningful engagement with the space that has to do with the village of origin, or with this is how it looked, this is how we wanted, or this is how we can relate to that space through invoking some of the memory. Reproduction or production, it's very tricky because in I think production is very problematic in Palestine. It's not like the Marxist thing because we don't have industrial zones, these are huge ones. Though during the occupation we had industrial zones in Palestine. In every city we have industrial zone, but that was very small industry. And I don't know, it's very tricky to say it's a production. But that thing enabled also migration and movement towards areas like Balata area or like Betunia near Ramallah, where you have new neighborhoods and extension, because once you build the industrial zone, you have infrastructure, and around that infrastructure you have housing, and you have cheaper places to live, and therefore Albiri industrial zone or Betunia industrial zone or Balata industrial zone in Ramallah, in Nablus becomes attractive places for urbanization. So gentrification is another thing, okay? I think we are not there yet, but it's happening. The movies that I showed is very related to this presentation. It's like a detachment from the surroundings. It's like you're creating your own niche within a particular occupation even. Within that cage, which is called Palestine, you create this kind of tabaka class that meet, they can be together. It's something that has to do with usually a middle class, single woman, but it has another process with us. It's creating a niche that is sometimes socially appealing, economically appealing, or politically appealing. So I love to go to my son Ibn Khaldun. He's called Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun, he always have this dyad, and almost there is a direct relation between urbanization, civilization, and the city, as it is the manifestation. This is the 14th century. 14 or 15? 15th century. Yeah, and there is almost a direct link between construction and destruction. He always professed that once you go up and suddenly you are flooded with the consumerism and then you are collapsing. This is his claim. So far it is somehow working, but the financial system keeps going on and providing us with the cash that we want so as not to collapse. So in Palestine, I would say it's impossible to separate the history of space from the history of colonization. Colonization destroyed urban and rural Palestine because they claim that they destroyed only the cities. This is not true, or they destroyed only the rural. It's not true. 450 or some villages and towns were destroyed. Safad, our north city, Haifa was the first of those to be evacuated. Jaffa, Tripoli hit. Yeah, so the cities as well as the rural Palestine was hit. And they created the conditions as well for economic dependency. So the Palestinians who were self-sustained, agrarian kind of subsistence, no more valid, no longer possible, because they were vacated from their land. And the story Salim that gave us from Abu Shushi, the honor killing, or the honor killing because the land was done. And the relation between land and honor is so high actually in Palestine. So I think this is already known, dependency created by moving people from their land, putting them into the labor market of the colonial industry. And this changed all the landscape. So colonization, I keep going there. I say 3 words, one of them is colonization. Because this is what happened in 1948, and this is how Palestine space was divided or fragmented or collected or manifested. I don't know. It's like this is how Palestine was in the 19th century. Suddenly we have little Jewish plantations, 19th and early 20th century. The division, 1947, gives more than half of our land to the Jewish. We did not accept. We make a war. We lost all this thing. We kept the West Bank and Gaza Strip. 1967 was invaded, all taken by the Israelis. And now we are in the peace process that makes Palestine into smaller cantons. So this is a big thing. If you just want to understand the space, you have to understand this map. So it's nothing without its history. So this destruction was manifested. Palestinians, they always celebrate this key, their houses, the destruction. But the Israelis are enjoying this. There is gentrification happening in Jaffa. There is cafes and restaurants in their palaces. And even in Ain Hod, which has Romanian and Polish artists in North Palestine, it becomes an artist residency that we'd love to be there, but we cannot. We are refugees in Jenin refugee camp. Or if they were not expropriated, they are deserted, like Lifta village near Jerusalem. Actually, Lifta people were displaced to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, when it was occupied in 1967, they got the Israeli ID card, which means that they are residents of Israel, but they cannot return 5 kilometers from their refuge to their houses. And these houses are not only vacated, but they are a matter of looting. Actually, there is a project in my mind, and I was speculating about the kind of arches in these two in the veranda. What the possibilities if we don't have a record what kind of possibilities can exist in these vacant black holes? I have too many options, but we'll see. So I say colonization is not over, but I think Oslo Agreement and post-Oslo Agreement, which happened in 1993, an agreement signed between the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Israel, Rabin and Peres and Abu Mazen and Arafat, they signed an agreement, interim agreement, that makes a future peace possible. So this kind of agreement created new conditions that I would claim, though the structurally word does not appeal, structurally different from, they are not structurally different from those colonial conditions. And there are changes, but it's not that indicative. So for instance, within Oslo and post-Oslo era, we have the division of Palestinian territories into area A, B, and C. This is a big division and challenged and limited the mobility of Palestinians. Area A is under Palestinian Authority, totally, civil and policing. The area B is under administrative civil society Palestinian, but under the policing of Israel. Area C, the majority of the West Bank, which is 62% of the West Bank, is under full Israeli control, especially military control. So even in Oslo, within the beginning of Oslo, we have new construction methods that we were not allowed before, almost prohibited. Now we have movement of material, import, ideas, technologies that contributed to the making of Palestinian landscape nowadays. So if you have 32-floor skyscrapers in Ramallah, this would not have happened if we could not import the technology to have the concrete and the steel, or to import the Belgian glass to cover the windows, or to have the possibility to clean that glass in a dusty environment. So this is a technological improvement, between two brackets, that led to the kind of architecture that we have. In new liberal conditions, I call it always post-Arafat era, when the financial system becomes the governing system in Palestine, actually. It is there you have the possibility to get indebted and therefore get cash and do whatever you want in your life. Liberating yourself from the patriarchal society, because we used to be families, and suddenly you can do this without your family. You can go to the bank, have a house, have a wife, have a husband, and maybe a car, something like that. So the financial system becomes a governing tool in the sense that there is some new meanings injected in the ordinary Palestinians who were liberated from the noble families who will loan them, or liberated from their father and the patriarchal system. So during the post-Oslo Agreement and post-Oslo Agreement, there were new planning schemes, especially expanding the urban space, okay? But this expansion was also limited by the colonial power. So Ramallah, Nablus, everybody could propose a plan, could propose urban plan, a new one, which is enlarge the possibility to build and to expand the urban center. Two limitations: don't touch the settlement, don't be close to the high roads, or to the bypass roads, the settler ports, and so on. But this way of doing urbanization or urban planning was always like a colonial, because they continued to do coloring. So planning in Palestine is still in yellow, green, red, orange, and these colors mean something. Like this is a green area, this is industrial zone, this is residential area, and this is commercial area. So still there is no social component or democratic engagement to make a planning. Therefore, there will be something that you don't imagine, like a wedding hall near a residential place kills it all, or a commercial center or industrial something near a playground for kids. So it's a very problematic way of planning. And in this also, in post-Oslo era, because of the movement of bodies and information, Dubai, Amman, Beirut, and even a settlement like Muda'in becomes the models of urbanization in Palestine, and loudly said, like we build Rawabi to echo Muda'in, like we build a city that looks like Modi'in, which is a great example. So Modi'in is a big city between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, was built to absorb some of the intensity or the construction from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. But it becomes like a big monster as well.
But is it really a good example?
No, it's not a good example, but this is the claim that this is how new cities should look like. I will come in a minute about it. So West Bank, and this is an important thing, the divide between Gaza and West Bank. We have two governments, one in Gaza and one in West Bank, and this is a big divide, I think contributed to the division of space in Palestine. But one moment, it's about this. But for those who does not know Palestine, this is the West Bank, and if you go to the yellow is the A and Area B areas, the purple is the settlements, and the white areas is Area C. So it's a big thing that contributed to the making of Palestine now, which I think this is the history. It's a destruction, expropriation, confinement, discontinuity from the Arab region or the Arab world, and the fragmentation of Palestine in post-Oslo era. This led, that fragmentation led to limited resource, which is land, urban sprawl, development pressure on area A and B, which changes the character of the area. And yeah, you see that this is a manifestation of post-Oslo era. You have a wall, which is 400 kilometers and more, will be 200. And this is, for instance, Gaza. I always love to show some images from Gaza, but I will not show a lot. This is the mosque and the harbor, Hashem Mosque and the harbor. And then this is 2014. You have an area comparable to the after destructions, like one bomb kill every tree and every house. So this is the kind of colonization I talk about. It's still active colonization, not in a very systematic, very subtle or soft. These are the examples that Palestinians go, Dubai get inspired or obsessed with. This is the Khalifa, this is the Louvre. We need the museums in Palestine as well, monuments, defines urban space. This is Beirut, downtown, very clean, very rigid, very gritty. This is Amman, towers and towers, phallic elements everywhere in the skyscrapers and so on. This is even Mamela in Palestine, in Jerusalem. You see the same grid that we saw in Beirut almost. And this is how things are branded. Okay, so in post-Oslo and post-Arafat era, I say like the new liberal agenda pushed far, and real estate industry becomes the only industry in Palestine. There is one spot in El Manara in Ramallah, which is 1.5 dönum. It is worth $62 million, and the negotiation stopped at that. So it is one of the most expensive areas in the world, not like Manhattan. It's more expensive than Manhattan. And the owner does not want to sell, actually. So this is kind of thing. Banking sector is working very well. All Palestinians are indebted. All the cars in the street are owned by the bank. 20,000 cars in Ramallah area alone owned by the Arab Bank, not the Palestine Bank, which is more, I think. We have 25,000 empty apartments in Ramallah. They are talking about 30,000 now. So you can imagine the real estate and the banking. What they are doing is something we cannot capture, and we need to talk about it so we can reflect, actually. Rural capital mobility. When rural Palestinians, they sold their land for quite a good money, they moved to the city instead of reinvestment that in the rural area. But this is the dream of them, is, as Ibn Khaldun said, is to be in the city, actually. So rural Palestine, just to have the dyad cleared or unpacked, so it's a space for construction or reconstruction. It depends on how you tell it. It is a commodity rather and the mean of reproduction or production. There is an immersion of new projects that fashion rural as a dream of the middle class urban. So the rural Palestine becomes a dream, fancy condos and so on for the middle class. Always exaggerating to make the point. If you think that, like the examples of taboo that Salim, I think, talked about in Little Reef, Bayyara, Rawabi, and others, they are this manifestation of the rural becoming a dream of the middle class. At the same time, the surplus which emerged from the rural Palestine is going to the city, which is the dream that Ibn Khaldun says every nomad wants to be in the city or to be civilized, something like that. غاية البداوة الحضارة in Arabic, I cannot translate. So in both movements, Palestinians have become a prey to kitsch and fetish. This is like we are either kitishism and fetishism. We are in between. So I will say what is kitsch, but kitsch, there is a shape for something. And fetish, the appearances, I think they hide some deeper meaning for me. It's not like the fetish and kitsch of Marx. Anyway, so there are socio-economic, political, cultural meaning of architecture and landscape. This is obvious. I did not say it. It's also an expression of class differences and expressions of power, governance, and policing. But Palestinians, this is how they built their houses in the 19th century and before. There was the reciprocity. They built houses together. They cultivated their land together. And if we talk about biotope, we can talk about Batir. It's like this whole ecosystem, a World Heritage Site in Palestine that has a peculiar week of 8 days. If you have 12 months today, 12 seasons, they have 8 days week. And this 8 days week has to do with the 8 families who has to use the water spring. There are 8 families, so they have to expand the week into 8 days instead of 7 days. So it's called 8, this week is 8 days, and so on. But this is how the space was life, nature, landscape, and the production were of the whole. It's an ensemble, let's say. And Palestine is like, architecture is symbolizing the power. It has to do, like that castle on top. It is a rural castle for a noble family or a well-off family that were collecting taxes and sending them to the government in Istanbul. So how they managed to build these palaces, actually. By being tax collectors, they managed to take a lot of money from the people and therefore managed to build hybrid architecture. We call it throne villages in Palestine. So village and urban, a kind of amalgamate, or they come together. Of course, like these, they're Ghassani, also Jamma'in, these are throne villages. But also Palestinians, they put their taste, actually, in that architecture. Columns like Jasser Palace or something, mural paintings in Safad, and Acre and Haifa. All these things are part of the Palestinian construction that the architecture resembles its makers. This is what I want to point out. So the kitsch and the fitch thing that I always play it, because then what does it mean to drive a 4x4 Land Rover Jeep, 5,000 cc, accompanied with all anti-mosquito lotions, to spend the weekend in the newly clay-constructed condo in Jericho, for example. They do it, and I saw it. And this is like we are out of space, as if we don't love the city enough and we don't love the village enough. We are in between. So the kitsch, there is a particular form, appearance, which is vastly distorted of how things or behaviors should look like. And the fetish, I would say, in the space, appearances mask a deeper meaning, what people longing for. So I would say that there were greater transformation of land meaning from production to a produce or to a product, transformation in the desires of longing of peasants toward the urban center, the emergence of a new rich class, nouveau riche, such as merchant and landowners. This new class, the class strives to strengthen its hegemony and capital through practicing consumerism, in consuming even rural Palestine as part of that manifestation of class. If you are a good Jerusalemite, you should have a house in Jericho now. If you are not, then you are poor or you are not classy. This is kind of thing. rural urbanization and urbanization of rural without the urbanization of the conscious or embodying really the rural life. This is Salim concept, actually. I will not talk about it, but it gives you an idea that we moved lots of people from rural Palestine to urban centers, but they did not urbanize their conscious. They brought the village with them. And those people who went to the village, they did not go for production. They went as for vacation, as if they are going to Italy or to Greece. So it's not like a real conscious move, which I would love Muhammad also, I think, consciously move to agriculture. Like we do it in Palestine, but in very small rhythm. Like I think for every one middle class who leaves urban centers, we have 10 people from the rural center moving to the urban center. So the equation is not still good. So this is the Palestinian landscape. This is from my land. Actually, my land and the others' land. But these are olive trees, orchards, not taken care of, and so on. But this has become a commodity rather than a production mean. So some projects like Tabu, they tell you on their website, choose wherever you want to live. Even if you are not a Palestinian from abroad, we can sell you a spot, and this is in your name. They sell you also the experience, and they use the folklore words to merchandise their goods. Like they will use Sarana al-Bayyara Tinu Zaytun, which is a song, popular song, to merchandise this for the urban center. Reef, which is rural, the rural areas is called reef in Arabic. So it becomes a project, but look at the buildings in the reef, which is totally alienated from the reef. They are not the reef. They look like Southern California, or I don't know where, in a resort. And then they manipulate the desires by these huge billboards. Like, and I'm sure this is a cut-paste thing, because this balcony was not yet constructed. But you look at that thing, and this is where you are going to live, the dream house. And usually there is a woman, a man, a dog, and one kid, or two maximum, with the glasses. Bet you, try it. And then they use publicity, really. It was used by Beres when he was in power to beautify the checkpoints between Ramallah and Jerusalem, talking about growth, work, living, just be nice people under occupation and you will be good. This is the same words that were used by Beres. Plan to beautify the checkpoints. So this is our dream cities before construction, but they are undergoing. For instance, this is Rawabi. You have this kind, if you saw Beirut and if you saw Mamella shopping mall, it's just the same. Even the characters in the images were imported from the 3D studio graphics. They are just the same in Dubai, in Beirut, in Amman, and in Palestine, which says a lot about the technology, how the similar technologies provide the similar images at the end. And yeah, it's not only images, it's real. There are, I think, more than 8,000 people living there now, or something like that, I don't know. It's supposedly 50,000 in the future. And we have all these, not only in Ramallah, Jericho, Ramallah, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, we have Domino's, we don't have McDonald's, but soon we'll have. And we have our version as well. It's imitation, mimicking Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is Palestinian without the KFC. So it's, and we have Star and Bucks, not Starbucks in Palestine. So we try to mimic that thing. But then we have a new goods to be consumed. It's a new thing that comes with the whole package of urbanization, like V&V, relax, let us do the job, which means a management company. You don't do anything, you just relax, we'll do it. This will never like that, it's becoming a new thing. And this policeman, he is not a policeman, he's a private bodyguard, private police. And we have 3 of them, or 4 now. So it's a big thing, but we pay 33 of our budget into security. Why we need private companies now to protect us? So this is kind of consumerism in new goods, I would say. I will not say that it is good or bad. Anyway, but then you have these clubs like fans of Barcelona and Madrid. It's a big grouping, a big niches in the community. People mask big things under these things, actually. If you are Barcelona, I would say what kind of party you are aligned with. If you are Madrid, I know, because I did a research, what your preference of things. Yeah. It's connected with political, but also with gentrification. This is the niche you create. But this is a hubbly-bubbly shisha that you order on the phone in Palestine. So you see the space and the urbanization has to do with consumerism and the meaning of things. Like the preparation of the shisha is important. Now it's not important. It's the delivery of shisha becomes more important. It's a ritual. And Ramallah, for instance, but not only Ramallah, I would say Hebron on a larger scale, Nablus on a larger scale, used to be something like that, and here it is. This is how it is. This is the urban of Oslo and post-Oslo. High-rise buildings, towers, and so on. And I like to show this always. And people, they say, are you constructing settlements in Ramallah? I say, no, this is not a settlement. Actually, this is the diplomat neighborhood of Ramallah, which is repetition, condos, and so on. So this Palestinian development, which echoes exactly the settlement, as if that model prevails. Of course, there are other examples, which is also, I think, problematic in the same way. This is Tel Safa, that I contributed to its design, that builds on our heritage, how to build a possible new village in Palestine. This is 1996, so early in the Peace Oslo Agreement. So this is also problematic because also it says that we have to dig back to our history to be able to proceed in the urbanization. So to conclude, I would say if we want to understand Palestine, we have to have everything in it, including mosquitoes and towers and people praying in the mosque, crafts from the Mamluk era, the production of dates in Jericho, or the symbol of fight between good and bad in the Hisham Palace of Jericho, and so on, and the borders, and the water, and the sky, and the airport, and the harbor, and the biannual destruction of Gaza, and so on, biennale of destruction of Gaza every 2 years, and so on. We have to, there is no urbanization that is out of history. It is a historical construction. It is not out of place. So I will not say that we'll stop Solidaire. Solidaire is the company that developed center town Beirut. And there is this St. George hotel that has this publicity since Hariri times until now. Stop Solidaire, which means stop the new liberal agenda that takes people's houses and convert them to a gentrified space. But in Ramallah, there is a very beautiful graffiti that this is Palestinian flag, and this is Palestinian, what is it, shi'ar, the logo, the Palestinian Authority logo, and it is a kind of making the bullet into the head. And because it's strange, you just connect the tank, the Israeli tank in the beginning of the presentation, and the bullet in the head, you find out that the urbanization is not a settled question in Palestine and will never be. Thank you.
You wish. I was actually wondering what your opinion of because city-states has been a big thing in Europe, and the development and the push towards this idea that the future of nations is actually not nations but city-states. And when I was in Ramallah, I realized that the way the administration works is that every city is essentially its own kind of mini. The administration, the overall administration is not so great, but so cities control their own municipal planning, for example. And I was wondering what do you think about this city-state thing in terms of a Palestinian context?
I will take one by one. Okay. I think there is some problematic take on this because I think since the division 2006, Gaza and Ramallah were evoked in every political debate meaning the division between the secular in the West Bank and the conservative in Gaza Strip. So Gaza resembles something, and Ramallah becomes the symbol of something. But it is not the city that makes the politics, I would say. I told you that we need to understand all this if we want to understand urbanization. And city-state is like referring to Ramallah as Hukumat Ramallah, the government of Ramallah. This is what we listen to them on the TV of Hamas, of Gaza, or we hear the Palestinian TV in Ramallah talking about the government of Gaza. And I think this is a problematic because this is not social construction, it is media and political party construction. Because, and I really don't want to go there because there will be no, for instance, who lives in Ramallah now? Okay, I'll tell you a story. The consensus, the statistics says that 40,000 are registered in Ramallah. But we know from Ramallah municipality statistics that 80,000 people live and sleep in Ramallah, okay? But in a normal day, we have 250,000 people in Ramallah. In a normal day when the ministries are opening and NGOs are opening. So who is in Ramallah? Who is registered to vote in Ramallah? So it's not a city-state. It's like who owns the streets, the markets also. This will be Hebron for sure, and the Dawis, which is refugees and Hebronites. They own most of Ramallah. But who owns the land in Ramallah is the Ramallites who are in Detroit. So it's very complicated, really. It's, but I think it will be superficial to say that there is some, the unit of governance or management is the city. It's true. It is not a new thing. Since Mandate era, even in Ottoman era, there are municipalities. Ramallah municipality is 1907, 1906, so it has been there. So there were management of populations through structures like municipalities since 1870 or even a little before. So it's not a new thing, and I think it will not be the political governance. It will be always the management of waste, water, disputes, construction, coloring the plans, and so on. Maybe that's.
The question about the future, because we know that the huge crisis is coming with the cutting off financial support from United States, and the current situation of Palestinian government is rather difficult. So how it will affect the cities?
I just arrived from Yale University when I presented about UNRWA in the Trump era. Trump era. UNRWA, the United Nations Refugees Relief and Aid Program for the Palestinians in the Middle East, and the Trump era when he cut all the subsidies. I found really in a thorough research for the last 8 months, since February, when Kaylee Haley, when she said we are no more giving money to Palestinians, in February 10th, I think. So I started the research since then, actually, and I found there is a big division of labor between donating communities. For the last 10 years, international community managed to overcome all these deficits in Palestinian budget and the UNRWA budget. So when people withdraw, some other people went in. It was amazing to have to construct that map, a table for 10 years. I colored it yellow, green, and red. Yellow when it was about the average giving, the international community, the United States, and the Arab world. And I found when there was something in red, which means give less, there was somebody in green giving more than the average. So anticipating this, I think nothing will collapse because it is that thing which is, I cannot explain why it's not collapsing. It should collapse. But it's not. We are waiting. I think we are in permanent, we have agency in waiting, actually. We are in permanent waiting for that collapse to happen so we can understand the consequences of withdrawal of humanitarian bodies and the American money. By the way, the Americans, they should give us $10 million this year, but they deposited in our account 200. So you can't imagine. There is something fishy happening. I cannot understand it, but it's all on their account. US aid and US government, they have all the statistics, they don't lie. I think they give more, maybe underground, but at least from the published amounts, they are giving us money until the moment. So they don't allow things to collapse, as if this temporariness is good to be permanent. Therefore, they will not allow Palestinians to be starving in Gaza. They will channel enough calories, as they did in the Knesset. They talk about it in the Knesset. We gave Gazans enough calories to be good. They were calculated how many calories a body will consume, and this was a big thing in the Israeli mind. I think, yes? To survive, not to be in luxury and so on. So anyway, I think the future is strange. How can I understand Ramallah, that I lived there for my life? Since I was 17, I live in Ramallah. And now when I hear that we have 25,000 apartment buildings empty, so what kind of speculations you have? Okay, if we have 25,000 apartment buildings in a place where population is 50 to 100,000, if you are studying Adam Smith and economy, demand and supply, I think every apartment should be $10 worth. Yeah, but never that case. It keeps going up. Stable goes up, stable goes up. This is crazy. It drives us mad. Still, in Ramallah, we have a cup of coffee of $4 and we have a cup of coffee of 40 cents. So this, I think, the biotope functions very well as a metaphor that lots of creatures can develop their own life or niches and survive. But a future which is glamorous, no. And one reason, I think, it's not to go back, but when Arafat entered Gaza, he said, I will turn Gaza to Singapore. To Singapore. Still ringing in my mind. Why Singapore? I don't like it. Really, I don't like it. Why? Why? Gaza is beautiful. Gaza was exporting roses 2,300 years before now. They were the harbor of roses. They were doing great things. Why to have Singapore? Singapore is a place for exploitation, banks and labor trafficking. What is this? So it's even, I think, we did not like what we are. And this is an important thing. There is an imaginary, this is the kitsch and fitch that try always, the kitschism and fishism that try to understand this imaginary thing that is better than ours. And maybe to Sandy, she knows about this, how it comes that we don't like the history that we developed ourselves. It's strange. So I'm not sure about the future. You can ask me about the past, maybe it's easier. Thank you. Okay, next.
Thank you, Khaldun, for an overwhelming presentation. Can you explain to me what the significance of the mosquito? What did you...
Why? I think... microphone. Yeah, I remember in 2001, 2003, there was if we want to travel, we travel through Jericho. Yes, we have a Limbe Bridge. And because of the Israeli closure, we have to wait. We have to wait hours, and sometimes we slept overnight at the bridge. And if you are good, really, if you want to be prepared, you have the anti-mosquito lotion that night. Otherwise, next day you will be reddish. You will be reddish. You will be totally eaten. It's eaten by the mosquito, and we call them doctors. The mosquito is a doctor, you know, because they are flourishing and they are good in status. So they are the only guy in front of you, and you start to do this and that and so on. So I think if you want to understand how colonization and urbanization happen, mosquitoes should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, that wasn't my question, actually. But
I understand. I understand.
Yeah, I want to follow up the issue of what after. What you showed us is a process of enhanced gentrification, overdevelopment, empty apartments, and it happens mostly in the greater Ramallah, Kufr Aqab region. Are you suggesting that what's happening in Tulkarem, Jenin, and Nablus are earlier stages of this growth. And perhaps not, but there is a distorted view, which probably is intentional to give us an acute observation of what's happening. So my question is, this is all injected by easy credit, by injection of money that the Europeans and the Americans played a big role in, and the Europeans still continue to do, also possibly from the Gulf states. The question is, what happens when the mortgages default and the empty apartments will become the symbol of what's happening, and the salaries that are coming from the public sector, which already are in jeopardy, dry up? You're suggesting that this will is not likely to happen because there's a collective interest on the part of the Europeans and the world community to keep this project afloat. I'm not so sure this is the case, because the Americans have already defaulted on their aid. They probably still inject the security forces with aid, but not the economic, not the infrastructural development. So I'm not sure this optimism, if it is optimism, is warranted. And the question is, what will happen if this credit system defaults and the economy collapses? I know that you've been asked this question before, but I think you need to give us some further thought.
Further thought that I have an optimist, which is internally a pessimist view, actually. I betrayed an optimism that things will not collapse, but this is, for me, is painful. I want them to collapse. This is just to make the story different, okay? So I think, I cannot assure you, but we've been in the peace process for the last 25 years. And there was the worst times, 2001, 2003, with destruction and everything. And then the Europeans and the Arab world came and reconstructed things. And they even reconstructed things differently and sometimes better and so on. And even with Gaza, Obama said we are paying $400 million in 2014-15, as if he created the demand and supply. See, he created the destruction, and then he created the demand for reconstruction. And so he bid Israeli to destroy, and he bid Palestinian to reconstruct. I'm not sure how things will, I think, okay, Salim, I think things should collapse if they are rational. But I think we've not been living in a rational way in the last 25 years. For those who does not know, Peace Agreement 1993 was an interim agreement that need to start the process of finalization of Palestinian-Israeli conflict in 5 years. So it's already expired. It should expired 1998. Until now, from 1998 until now, it's kept on its legs. It's moving in a good way and bad way. I'm not optimist, Salim. I think it will collapse, but I don't know under which circumstances it will. The bank system, you know how difficult they were giving loans, but they realized that 99% people pay money back, guaranteed. Even the Bank of Palestine gave salaries for 6 months to employees of the Palestinian Authority. And it was a threat to collapse for the bank. You know, a small bank cannot give salaries 6 months for employees, and he kept giving the money as if he knew that the money will be back. I don't know what kind of underground channels that they know. The banks are clever. They will not lose their money. So far, I know from statistics, Salim, that 99% they give back their loans in timely manner. Actually, who does not give the loan if it is a personal loan? If you give somebody money in Palestine, they will not give it to you back, for sure. And there are lots of fraud on checks now, the business things, if you are dealing with checks. For instance, 2-3 months ago, the Palestinian Authority stopped receiving the money from our taxes from Israel, because they cut on the martyrs and prisoners part. So we don't have money to pay the employees. So they were paid half salary, 40% salary, 60% salary. But I don't know. It's like the banks keep giving them 2-3 months salaries in advance and give them little loans to sustain themselves, as if we know that this money will go back to Palestine and we will be flooded with money and the prices will go up again. So in that 3 months, we know that 60,000 checks were returned with no bounced, come back. So 60,000 checks every month. We have 20,000 checks came back bounced from the bank. So there were not enough money to cover them. But we did not see a collapse in the street and people demonstrating against the bank or people killing each other because they did not give the money or the check bounced. So okay, if I understand Palestine, I would not talk about it, really. I sometimes try to talk to invoke kind of understanding to be able to speculate about the future. So by doing the design for that research, for the Trump era, I thought that the UNRWA will collapse. From my research, it will not collapse. So this is, for me, was shocking. I said even the title is Death Sentence, UNRWA in the Trump era. It turns to be not death sentence, it's life sentence to be with Trump and to be with the UNRWA. I know you said might have other answers on collapse.
Well, I was thinking, actually, there's a very extreme theory. Sorry, is it all right? Yeah. Adel Samara. He thinks, this is a Marxist thinker who is a maverick, but he concentrates on the future of the economy. And he believes that the option is a return to a very idealistic rural economy and some kind of urban agriculture which will absorb the shock that's about to come. And this is a residue of the first Intifada. I personally think it's a dreamlike situation because first, people don't change their habit. Muhammad probably subscribes to this, but they don't change their habit that way. And secondly, I don't think we have agricultural plots that can absorb the labor force in such a, but maybe they do, I don't know.
Maybe I can weirdly connect with this last observation because my question was completely unrelated to your previous answer, so it was not political at all, but it was about one of the projects that you've shown, which is like this 8 days a week settlement. And I would like, if you, sorry for using I use the word settlement in a more generic way, not in a specific of the settlement village. Like I would like you to expand in how actually this ecosystem works, in fact, in terms of like agriculture, and how actually the architecture is connected with this terraced structure that you showed, and how actually thrives, and also like questions into the question about like the water shortage and how this is actually, maybe this is the political part of the question, like influences this change on the routine of this village.
I think Muhammad and Sandy knows about it a lot, but I will try. I'm in heritage industry, actually. I'm doing restoration, and the World Heritage list is part of our work. And 3 years ago, I think, or 4, the site of Batir, which is west to Bethlehem, was subscribed as a World Heritage Site because of its peculiar agriculture, settlement, and water division through the last 3,000 years. So I think, first of all, for the terraces, they look like Tuscany, they are beautiful, but in Palestine there are many things like this. It's like the way how we make use of steepy landscape. We construct fences and we put the cut and fill, and therefore we make terraces, maximize the land use or the place that can be cultivated. For the water, it has been always, the water is a big thing in every village and town in Palestine. It is the main resource, actually. It's more important than the oil or any resource. So the use of the spring, for instance, is communal use. And it's what we call it private common. Is that use for the village or for the clans of the village. And if you are from other village or town and want to use it, you have to have a consensus to use it. You cannot go and irrigate your cattle from that spring without, there is there is a boundary, a territorial area where people who can use that spring. And every village in Palestine has 2 or 3 or 4 springs. Therefore, the settlement, actually. Without the water, there is no life. So in this particular space, at least from what we learn from the people themselves, that there are 8 families. And it is just a practical issue how you divide 7 by 8. It's impossible, by the way. So it's like, instead of that, you add 1 and 8. You call it the 8th day. And therefore, you can divide the water in 8 days. And this constellation, time constellation, you call it a week. So there is, it's not a Gregorian week or something. You call it. It's not, I think, I don't know who named it, like a week of 8 days. But like today, we had 12 seasons in Warsaw. It's not only 4. In Palestine, I think we have 1, summer. It's called summer, long summer. So I think it is, it shows something important that the people themselves have been creative in not naming things, but creating structures that allow them to proceed with their everyday life. It is not creativity in that sense that we talk about it, like you are an IT system, then you are good. No, there are people who are more creative to create a binary of 8 days rather than 0-1. The 0-1 for the computer, I mean. Okay.
One more, because how this enormous urbanization is, making sense when you know how big is the problem with water shortages in Palestine. How is it, how come that Kfar Ahab is functioning and this is it just doesn't make sense when you want to be rational. That's true. So water accessibility is one of the factors that architecture is based on.
I will show the slide and talk about it really, because you're right. Totally, I agree with you. I think we are hitting the wall. Actually, this is Jalazon refugee camp. Yeah, it's not concrete jungle. It has black dots jungle. See all these? These are water tanks, water reservoirs that we wait for 1 week for the water administration to give us water. We store it on top of the house and let it fall by gravity. Muhammad talked about it yesterday. But I think this is not human, but this is how it is in Palestine. All of us wait until that 3-4 hours, sometimes twice a week when you are privileged, but sometimes once 3 months like in a Dhahriya. And usually settlements has to take the majority of the water, the excess will come to Palestine. We buy it actually, we don't have it for free. It's our water, the aquifer under Arael and Ain Samia, it's under Israeli control. So we have limited water going, for instance, to Deir Ghassana, where I have some small orchard of olive trees. Halmish settlement has to be fed with water until it's finished. Then the water will go to Nabi Saleh and then Deir Ghassana, my village. So it is like a big discrepancy. Muhammad said something yesterday that we consume as 1 to 3 or 4 as settler. But I think if we put agriculture into that component, every settler consumes 24 times Palestinian. So Palestinians are really the war in the future. There are books, I think, on this. The war is about water. We don't have enough water because Palestinians are not using it rationally, maybe, but the Israelis are exceeding any kind of rationality in water, the usage. Like why we need to produce bananas? Why to have all these avocados? We need to drink water. And why to wash all these cars and all green spaces like in Jaffa or in Haifa? Or this is like sanctioned in not Southern California even, in drought times. So I think we take the money from Tiberia, take it to the desert in Negev area and make it bloom. And all the agriculture in Israel constitute at less than 3% of the budget of Israel. So what you buy in Europe, Jaffa, blah, 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 this is nothing for economy. The economy in Israel is IT, military, drones, and what is it? Yeah, medicine. These are the three components of the Israeli money. But ideologically, they have to spend money supporting Israeli farmers, making the desert bloom. This is ideological question, and they question this many times in the Knesset. And they think that, that the use of water is not sustainable. We have more or less 10 million people living in historic Palestine, including the Palestinians, and the water will not be sufficient even for domestic use. So there is, I believe, this is the response of the Palestinians. It's not at all resistance. It's a practical, everyday life. If you are in shortage, you will add one other tank, like what I did in Kufr Aqab. In Kufr Aqab, the problem is like you have 12 floors. Then you will wait until the whole people beneath you get water, and then in the night you might get some drips into your tank. So it's very problematic. Many times we went to the work without washing our bodies, which is okay, but this is fine. We try to compensate with some perfume and
Okay, I think we make a short break because between the second session, yeah, that will be held by Simona. Thank you, Khaldun.